Jack Dallas led a quiet, solitary life in his small house on the outskirts of Los Angeles. His neighborhood was one of the quietest and most prestigious in the area, surrounded by family homes, luxury cars, and manicured gardens that made you feel lucky. And Jack was very lucky, although he was also very lonely. After a lifetime of service to others as a police captain, Dallas decided it was time to retire and start enjoying life while he still had energy and time. Unfortunately, 6 months after retirement, and while enjoying a well-deserved vacation in Mallorca with his wife, Megan, he received the worst news of his life. His wife was gravely ill and had only a few months to live. And so it was that after having to say goodbye to his wife prematurely and with a broken heart, Jack locked himself in his glamorous home and became, little by little, a lonely and distrustful person who only left his house to do the shopping or go to the bank, although he did so less and less frequently. Little or nothing remained of the energetic, kind, and always ready to help others man who worked in the police. Those who knew him well no longer dared to go to see him because whenever they tried, he always made up false excuses for not opening the door, or he would send them on their way. No one knew anything about him except the letter carrier, the milkman, the supermarket cashiers, and the bank branch manager. All of them people with no interest whatsoever in his life, and whom he didn't really know at all. And that was what Jack wanted so fervently: to be forgotten. Some would see his attitude as a reflection of his sadness at the loss of his wife. But the truth is that no one really knew what was going through Jack Dallas's mind. Until something changed. It happened in October, a week before the celebration of the neighborhood festivities, a small tribute to the arrival of autumn in which all the neighbors participated by cooking homemade desserts with autumn ingredients and dressed in the scents of the season: green, orange, red, and yellow. The whole neighborhood was ready for the fall party, and the gardens were dressed in their best. All except Jack's house, of course. While the neighbors were talking and commenting on what they had cooked, Jack spent the hours sitting by his second-floor bedroom window, from which he could see everything going on in the neighborhood. He would eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner sitting there, making up all kinds of stories in his head about what his neighbors were doing or saying. It was an unhealthy habit that consumed him and made him look like an old crackpot. But he didn't care. Day after day, he noted his neighbors' comings and goings, their friendships, and even the clothes they usually wore. He looked like a private detective on a secret mission. Everything was going normally in the neighborhood, and Jack was finishing his second cup of coffee, when something caught his attention and made him forget for a few moments the person he had become: the arrival of a new neighbor. It was late in the afternoon, and there was hardly anyone left walking down the street, when suddenly a mysterious black car turned the corner and drove up to the last house on the avenue. It was the only empty house in the whole neighborhood, and had been closed for more than a year since its former owners decided to move to New York, a traditional and wealthy couple who wanted to spend their last years with their children and grandchildren. Since then, no one had entered it, until that day. The shiny black Mercedes-Benz drove slowly to the end of the street and then very smoothly pulled into the garage of the house and stayed there until the early morning of the next day. The same thing happened the next night, and the next, and all the others. Every day, the black car would appear at the end of the street at 8 o'clock in the evening and drive up to the driveway of the abandoned house. None of the times, Jack could see who was driving the car. He only knew that it was someone with money and someone in the back accent, possibly a little girl wearing a bright red coat that he could see from the window of his house. But nothing more. With each passing day, the former police captain became more and more obsessed with that black car, and who would be in it. But what really intrigued him the most were the reasons why the car appeared every day at the same time in the neighborhood and spent the whole night inside the old garage of a house, and then left at dawn without being seen. Ever since he saw it appear the first time, Jack's only thought was of that car. His daytime surveillance of the neighborhood had taken a back seat, and now all his thoughts and efforts were focused on uncovering the mystery surrounding the owner of the black Mercedes-Benz and his little nighttime companion. But what Jack Dallas would end up discovering a few days later was unexpected and would change his life completely. There is only one way to find out who goes inside that car and what they do every night in that garage. I must follow him and get as close as I can to the garage to see what goes on inside. Jack said to himself one morning, after staying up all night hoping to catch a glimpse of the car's driver or his companion as he left the garage. The mystery of the black car had restored Jack's illusion and had awakened his old police instincts and prompted him to change his dull habits of life. You could almost say that his nightly stakeouts of the garage at the end of the street had given him back the zest for life he had lost. Although his detective skills had re-emerged from the depths of his being, there were still other issues he had to face if he wanted to solve the mystery car case. Getting back out on the streets and socializing. Jack had not spoken to anyone in his immediate environment for over a year, nor had he been seen in the neighborhood during peak social hours. However, if he really wanted to know who the owner of that car was and what he was up to every night in the garage at the end of the street, he would have to get back out on the street and, inevitably, talk to people. After all, what would be the point of finding out what was going on if he didn't dare tell anyone afterward? That mysterious man, supposedly a millionaire given the car he was driving, could be committing a serious crime just a few meters away from him and the rest of the neighbors. Who knows if he was a kidnapper, a human trafficker, or even worse? If that man had good intentions, he wouldn't be hiding every night in an abandoned garage without being seen, Jack said to himself, while he thought up all sorts of theories. But what the former policeman did not know was that the truth he would end up discovering would exceed all his expectations and leave him speechless. It was only a few days before the neighborhood fall dance, and all the gardens were already adorned with flowers and handmade garlands of dried leaves. The neighborhood was beautiful, and everyone was in a great mood for the impending celebrations, but all that happiness and the colorful decoration of the houses only made the only empty one on the street look even more conspicuous and sadder than ever. It was the perfect opportunity to unmask the mysterious millionaire in the black Mercedes-Benz and find out what he did every night in the abandoned garage, and Jack knew it. That same evening, after taking a shower and getting dressed in one of his best suits, gray pinstripe that he had only worn on one occasion and didn't even remember where he had kept it, Jack went back out into the street with the sole objective of unraveling the mystery and neutralizing the danger that this mysterious individual and his nocturnal activities could pose to the neighborhood. His plan was to interview a few neighbors, preferably those who lived closest to the abandoned house, and try to find out if they knew anything about the man driving the black car and his companion. But his investigative methods would not have the results he had hoped for. No one seemed to have seen the black car Jack was telling them about, and some even dared to insinuate that he was starting to lose his mind, advising him to see a psychologist to help him deal with his loneliness. A black car in the Stevens abandoned garage? Are you sure? Is everything all right, Jack? I haven't seen you in the neighborhood for a long time. I thought you moved away. Anything you want to talk about? How are you doing? How are you coping with being retired? Asked a trusted neighbor, Mrs. Morris, whom he had known for more than 20 years, and with whom his wife had a beautiful friendship. Jack had quite a different opinion of her. He respected her and treated her well out of respect for his wife's memory, but he found the woman a real nuisance. Nor was there much luck with the other two neighbors he asked, except for one thing the neighbor who lived wall to wall with the abandoned house, Mr. Harris, told him. "I don't know what car you're talking about, Jack, but if you're referring to the strange noises you hear at night, I have no idea where they're coming from. I was about to ask another neighbor about it. Every night, around midnight, I hear noises. Sometimes I get the feeling that it's music, like a piano, but then the sound disappears, and I can't figure out what it is," the neighbor said, very intrigued. "Music? Are you sure?" Jack Harris nodded and, intrigued by his neighbor's insistence, asked him again about his mental health and his motives for initiating such an investigation on his own. "I'm sure, yes, but I don't think the music hurts anyone, does it? In any case, it's a nice sound, and it doesn't last long. Is everything all right, Jack? Do you really think there's something bad going on in that garage? Or are you just doing it to distract yourself? Loneliness is very bad. You see, I became a widower myself 5 years ago, and—" He began by telling him, "I'm perfectly fine. Thanks for your concern, neighbor. And yes, I am investigating on my own, but that doesn't mean I'm crazy, or that what I investigate is unimportant. I would tread carefully and keep a very close eye on the house next door, especially at night. Music can be useful for many things, including hiding what you are really doing and creating a sound distraction for others. Don't forget that, and if you see anything strange, anything at all, let me know." "Got it?" replied Jack, a little annoyed by his neighbor's passive attitude and his insistence on going to therapy. The last person he spoke to that afternoon was the old woman who lived in the house directly across the street from the abandoned garage. Jack figured that this woman must have seen or heard something that would be useful to him, and he wasn't wrong. That man is hiding something, and the little girl with him, oh, poor little angel, I can barely see her face, but you can tell she's in pain. Their clothes are expensive. They look like people with a lot of money, but I don't understand why someone rich would want to spend the nights locked up in an old and abandoned house. And the child? That poor child needs a mother and a father to take care of her. Poor thing. Sleeping every night in that filthy place," the old woman commented, very worried. The latest revelations by the old woman made it clear to him that he was right to be suspicious of the man and his intentions, and also encouraged him to take the last step in his secret investigation, to come face to face with the man in the black car and find out what he does every night with the little girl. Whatever that millionaire is hiding, I'll find out. My instinct as a policeman has never failed me, and I'm sure that something very bad is going on in that garage," he said to himself, looking out the window and analyzing every detail of the neighborhood to try to memorize it. The next day, Jack prepared his plan to confront the millionaire. That night was the annual fall dance and the neighborhood pumpkin pie contest. Everyone would be busy celebrating and sharing their culinary creations. It was the perfect day to take action without being seen. Throughout his police career, Jack had learned that it is better to catch a criminal by surprise, to prevent him from escaping, and to catch him in the act. And that was precisely what he was going to do that night, with the millionaire in the black car. Or at least, that's what he thought he was going to do. At 9 o'clock, Jack got dressed and went down to the street. His idea was to blend in with the crowd, going from one house to the next until he reached the garage and found a good hiding place without anyone noticing what he was doing. There he would wait for the arrival of the black Mercedes-Benz, and then, without making much noise, he would surprise him and find out what he did every night. Jack was a policeman and knew how unpredictable criminals can be, especially if they get nervous. So he decided to dress like a regular citizen and act like any neighbor who enjoyed the good atmosphere in the neighborhood. Drawing too much attention to himself would only cause the mysterious man to flee, and that would spoil the whole operation. 10 o'clock at night. Jack's plan was going according to plan. The whole street was full of neighbors and children eating and playing, while he waited hidden behind some garbage cans by the garage door. "He's slowing down. What happened to him?" Jack said, disgruntled as he continued to wait, growing more and more impatient. 11 o'clock at night. Jack was beginning to think it would be best to abort the mission and try again the next day. But suddenly, he saw it. The black car had just turned the corner of the street and was speeding toward the garage. "There it is! The time has come!" exclaimed Jack, euphoric. The car parked in front of the garage door, and two people got out of it. A middle-aged black man and a little girl, about 7 or 8 years old, maybe younger, wearing a bright pink dress. They walked in silence and entered the garage, closing the door behind them. Jack followed them and stayed hidden for a few minutes. Then, when he began to hear noise inside, he walked over to one of the side windows and peered inside. What he saw in there would leave him speechless and would demolish all his police theories. Jack expected to find a thief's hideout or some sort of cell where the man in black was holding the girl against her will. But there was nothing of the sort. The noise he had heard came from a small electric oven, similar to the one used in the mountains when you go camping. On it was a pot in which a soup was being heated. The smell of chicken had begun to flood the whole instance. A few meters away, there was a small mattress on which the little girl was sitting playing with dolls. In the background, he could see a washing machine running, and all over the garage there were ropes from which clothes were hanging to dry. On one side, against the wall, was a small red electric piano and a stool of the same color to sit on to play it. "That must have been the music the neighbor told me he had heard," thought Jack, as he continued to stare through the window in amazement. Near the girl in the pink dress, she could see a sleeping bag and a couple of blankets. The place looked like a shelter, a makeshift home for two people who barely had enough to live on. The mysterious man in the black car, whom he had been so suspicious of, turned out to be a very ordinary man, dressed in a business suit and well-worn black shoes. His face showed signs of fatigue. He looked like an educated upper-class person from a good family, to whom life had been going quite well. In the past, he must surely have been that kind of man, but at the moment, there was none of the glamour or money left that his shabby clothes and the way he moved suggested. As he watched them, Jack began to feel very embarrassed and understood what was really going on in that old garage. The former policeman decided that the time had come to put an end to the matter. He took a deep breath and knocked gently on the garage door. A moment later, the door opened, and the man's frightened face appeared. His face was not that of a criminal trying to escape from the police. It was that of a good man in trouble who was just trying to survive. "Who are you? Is there a problem, sir?" asked the black man with a trembling voice. Jack decided to tell him the whole truth and did not beat around the bush. "Honestly, I had come with the intention of arresting you and taking you to the police, but now I just want to give you a hug. May I come in?" Jack said honestly, offering his hand as a gesture of good faith. The man looked at him without quite understanding what Jack was trying to tell him, but didn't hesitate to invite him in and offer him a hot cup of the soup he had just cooked. They spent over 3 hours talking, And in that time, Jack learned that the man's name was Mark Waters and that the little girl with him was his niece, Emma. Apparently, the girl's parents had died 6 months earlier, and he was the only family she had left. Unfortunately, shortly after adopting Emma, the technology company Mark managed went bankrupt, losing all his possessions. The only things he was able to talk about were the black car Jack had seen, his niece's piano, and little else. One night, looking for a place to sleep, he found that abandoned-looking house and decided to sneak in to protect himself from the cold. Since then, the garage had become his only home, while Mark searched for a solution to his problems. "I am sorry if I have caused you any discomfort. I'm just trying to take care of my niece and keep her from starving and freezing to death out there. I couldn't bear to know that she is sick because of me," Mark confessed, very sadly. "You have nothing to apologize for. You're a good man. You've just been unlucky, that's all. But you're not alone anymore, Mark. I'll help you," said Jack with a smile. Jack was as good as his word, and just a week after their first meeting on Autumn Festival, Mark and his niece Emma had already been able to start living in a cozy downtown apartment, and Mark had found a new job as a manager for a prestigious company. Jack knew the owner and owed him a favor, so he didn't hesitate to give the job to a person who really needed it and who met all the requirements for the position. Mark Waters' life was still far from what it was, but thanks to Jack's help, he was able to start over and feel that life was giving him a second chance. For his part, Jack learned a powerful lesson that he would never forget, and that gave him back the will to live. Never judge someone by appearances. Be kind, always. You never know what might be going on in other people's lives.